Hmm.
Okay,
Hmm.
welcome everyone to the American Cetacean Society San Francisco Bay Chapter's March 2026 speaker event. And I'm Susan Hopp, board member responsible for our speaker program. And with me is fellow board member Firuze Gokce. Now, for anyone new to the American Cetacean Society, we are a chapter within a national organization that is the oldest nonprofit dedicated to the protection of whales, dolphins, porpoises, and their habitat. And we do this through education, community engagement, and awarding grants towards cetacean research. And it is your donations that truly support our mission and enables us to put on these monthly talks, create our online courses, and give research grants. And regarding our research grants, we are getting very close, and we're very excited to very shortly announce the winners of the Izzy Shaponyak 2025 grant cycle. All right, well, tonight's talk reflects our intention to increase our community engagement because paired with our talk is a community whale watch in Monterey Bay this Sunday at 10 a.m., led by our esteemed speaker, who I'll be introducing momentarily. At last count, there are about at least 25 of us that will gather to enjoy the magical life of Monterey Bay on Sunday. So we'll put that chat, the link into the chat for any additional of you who might be interested. And we also are pairing this great talk with an art auction that is underway by board member, our amazing board member artist, Firuze. And her cetacean art is based on real stories of cetaceans in our own Pacific Ocean backyard. So the links again for both the whale watch and the
Hmm.
art auction is in the chat. And you can see by Firuze's background some of her art. Okay, so we're recording tonight's presentation, and please put your questions in the Q&A. That's actually better for us than the chat, and we will field them after the presentation. So the title of our talk might just be All the Introduction Our Speaker Needs: Endless Learning and Wonder, 40 Years Observing Killer Whales, because that is what Nancy Black is bringing to us tonight. And a little bit about Nancy. After graduating with a master's in marine science from Moss Landing Marine Labs, Nancy Black started Monterey Bay Whale Watch in 1992, focusing on Pacific white-sided dolphins and killer whales. Now, for over 40 years, she has worked with cetaceans in Monterey Bay, including as the primary investigator for the Oceanic Society's whale and dolphin research program. And a sought after presenter, Nancy is the author of numerous scientific publications and has been featured on television in the Blue Planet Seas of Life series and on the Discovery Channel's Animal Planet series. So, Nancy, I know we are going to learn and be wondered by so much tonight. And just, I want to hand it over to you so we maximize the time. And again, thank you so much for being here.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Happy to be here. So I'm talking about ecology of killer whales, kind of in general, and also about with other people, my long-term study of killer whales off California. We have a nonprofit group, California Killer Whale Project. So I will mention that as well. Let's see, slides turned here. Okay, so of course, killer whales are really amazing animals in many ways. That's why I've spent so many years studying them. I can't believe it has been that long, but we don't see them every day. That's why it takes a long time to learn about them. They're not here every day, like humpback whales may be here seasonally. We'll see them every day, but killer whales are unpredictable. You have to be out there all the time or get reports and dash out there because you just never know the day they're going to show up. So that's why I started my whale watch actually was so I could be out on the ocean a lot more when the killer whales did show up. But they are amazing animals. They're top predators, highly intelligent, very social with a complex society. And these are some photos by photographer Morgan Quinley, all from Monterey Bay on our trips, just to show you how amazing they are. And this is all part of Monterey Bay. And so about killer whales, they have a very long gestation period. This killer whale is a little calf. You can see its vertical lines, its fetal folds, and that's how they're first born when they're curled up in their mother's womb. It leaves these lines on for several months after. They also are very orangey in color when they're first born. That's from the thin skin, the blood vessels shine through. So this is a little tiny calf. Also about killer whales, the menopause, females do have menopause. Very few mammals do besides humans. They're very widely distributed in all the oceans, very long-lived. The longest killer whale is estimated to have been about 105 years old. That was Granny in one of the southern residents. However, they are very long-lived. Females longer than males. Females about up to 60 to 90 years. Males maybe 50 to 60. We do have some males in our population that are up there about 50 or 60 years old. And the calf mortality, unfortunately, is quite high, up to 50%. And I divided it up into different topics. So the first is about ecotypes, which is something that all killer whales show. An ecotype is a distinct population or group within a species that has adapted to a specific environment or ecological niche. So each ecotype shows differences in their diet, hunting strategies, communication, physical traits. They look different, their body size, fin shape and color. They're different genetically, so they're almost like from different oceans. And geographically and ecologically, they're separate. So these are two of the main ecotypes off our coast here that most people are aware of, because killer whales all belong to the same species, but they do form different ecotypes. So the transients or the mammal hunters, and on the right, the resident or the fish eaters. They really don't look that different, but they're extremely different. They're so different genetically, like they're from different oceans. So I will talk about some of the other ecotypes as well. How to move it here. Okay. So not all killer whales are the same, as I mentioned here, just a summary of the different ecotypes. This is in the Pacific, right off California. There's possibly 5 ecotypes. The first 3 are very well known. The residents, as I mentioned, the fish eaters, the transients, the ones that eat marine mammals. Offshores are also known to be very genetically different. They eat sharks. They specialize in a variety of sharks. The eastern tropical Pacific killer whales have ventured up into Southern California. They're quite different as well in their appearance and behavior. And there's an outer coast mammal hunting group that's very different than our coastal transient groups. They are found much further offshore, like 50 to 100 miles out, very rarely come into the coast. Antarctica, there's also 5 ecotypes, 6 with the 2 Bs. And North Atlantic, there's 2, probably other in the world as well. And Antarctica, the killer whales look very different. Look at the eye patch of type D and type B1, very different. So these are killer whales found around Antarctica, and they're probably pretty much considered different species now because they are so different. Some eat seals, some whales, fish are others. These B1s are the wave washers that wash the seals off the beach. So quite different. In our North Pacific, the residents, the Biggs killer whale are the transients. They're named after Michael Bigg, who is passed now, but he was the first one to tell the difference between the resident type and the transient type in British Columbia and the offshore. So just looking at them, you can't really tell that much different, but they are so different. And the black goes into the saddle for the residents. It doesn't in the transients. And offshores, the fin shapes are very different as well. And in the Atlantic, there's thought to be 2 ecotypes. So our off California, right in Monterey Bay, there's the mammal hunting, the transients, the fish eating residents, and the shark hunters, the offshores. These were all in Monterey Bay. This is 7-gill shark being eaten by an offshore type of killer whale. So here are the fin shapes. The offshore, since they eat sharks, they often have very marked up fins. The residents have that black, not all of them, but they can have black going into the white saddle. The transients only white. Transients have more of a pointed fin. residents are more falcate. So once you get to know them, you can tell the difference when you're out in the wild, but to the average person, they look very similar. These are the residents or fish eaters. This was taken in Monterey Bay one January many years ago when there was a big storm out there, and we dashed out just to see them because the residents are not seen in our area, Monterey Bay, very often, but they do show up in the wintertime. I first identified them here in the year 2000. Before that, 20 years before that, we never saw them. And that probably corresponded to when the salmon population started to decline and they had to venture further away to find their food. But they do feed primarily on Chinook salmon. Chinook salmon is very low in abundance along the West Coast right now, unfortunately. These killer whales, the southern residents, are kind of basically starving to death, unfortunately, unless we do something very drastically to fix the salmon population. They need to get the salmon increased in order for them to survive. They eat about, on average, 400 pounds of fish a day per whale. They're very vocal, very animated, very active. And there's different populations of these residents. They range from California all the way up to British Columbia. And then from there, there's different populations of resident type killer whales. They're the same species, they're just different whales that range all the way out to the Aleutians and then across to Russia and Japan. So they're quite widely dispersed. Yeah. And they are pretty much mama boys. Most killer whale males are mama's boys. They stay with their mothers pretty much for their entire lives. And that's with most of the ecotypes. So the fish-eating whales are generally found in these larger groups. Matrilineal group is pretty much describes the killer whales, which means a female, adult female with her offspring. That is a matriline. This is one right here. And those matrilines gather together to form pods and clans. So the southern residents, the resident type, will be many matrilines swimming together for their lives to form a group like this. Transient, or the mammal hunters, are in small groups of 2 to 7, and they stay in those core matriline groups. They don't live in very large groups. Only temporary associations will become very large. So that's how they're different as far as the group size. And the offshore ecotype, we know less about them because we don't see them as often. When we do see them, they're found usually not too far off the coast here. That name is not very good because they're not really offshore. They were given that name when they were first identified off British Columbia many years ago. They were seen on the outer coast of Vancouver Island, so not the inland water. So that's how they got the name. But they are pretty coastal from when we see them. They do have all those distinct markings on them, probably from eating sharks. That's what they specialize in, a whole variety of sharks, blue sharks, mako sharks, even great white sharks. So they probably follow the shark migrations, which we really don't know much about along the coast here. And this is one population of offshore type killer whales, whereas the residents, remember, they were different. There's the southern residents that were here, and then you go to the northern residents. And as you go up the coast, there's different groups of resident type whales that live in those specific areas. But with the offshores, it's one population that covers this entire range. I've seen some of the offshores that were seen in California here, and I happened to be up in the Bering Sea on a Aleutian Island survey, and I saw the same killer whales up there that I saw in California, and other people have identified them as well. So this represents like the same whale seen in all these different areas up and down the entire West Coast. So they have the longest known movement for any delphinid, this offshore group. And again, they're probably following the shark migrations, which we really don't know much about at all. Sharks are not doing so well worldwide because unfortunately they're caught in fishing gear quite a bit. And that's what this type of killer whale depends on. The Biggs transient type is the one that we see most often. And that's the one I'll talk more about on this talk here because we see them several times a month, sometimes more, sometimes less. There's seasonality. Upcoming in April and May is a time of year we see them more often than other times of year, but they feed only on mammals, a whole variety of mammals. Again, they live in those small matrilineal groups ranging from Southern California to Southeast Alaska. And again, like residents, there's different populations of the transients. So this is the West Coast transients, mostly off California, Oregon, Washington, but they can range up further north. So this is all one population here, the West Coast transients. Then it's a different population of transients that are found, such as the Aleutian Islands, which do not venture down to California. So they have their certain areas they cover, like our whales. This is the same individual whale and these black dots. They have been seen off Southern California, the same whale, and then as far as Southeast Alaska, which is pretty rare. Only one group has been up there, but many groups have been as far as the Queen Charlotte Islands. In fact, most of our transient killer whales have been sighted as far as British Columbia and the Queen Charlotte Islands certain years. Of course, there's not as much effort up there as there is off our coast, but they are there every year. And we do work with other people up and down the coast, and that's how we know where they're seen. This other type of killer whale, the Eastern Tropical Pacific, they have been seen recently off Southern California. There was a period of time where they were seen several days in a row, and they came to hunt dolphins. It was pretty spectacular. Let's see if this. They were caught on social media quite a bit attacking dolphins and tossing them in the air. It's pretty amazing hunting method they use. And they were mostly found in Mexico, but they do venture up probably because the water was a little bit warmer, because they're not normally seen in California as much as they were in those last few years because of the warmer water. And that could be something happening more often. And this group, the LA pod, Lisa Schulman-Janiger, who works with me all these years, has studied these quite a bit in Southern California. We don't see them anymore, but this is the type of killer whale probably related to the offshores, although they never really mixed with them. They're kind of a mystery group. There's only about 13 in them. They never had a calf, very marked up. And they're the first killer whale that was seen attacking a great white shark at the Farallon Islands in 1997. Then they hit Monterey Bay, and we never saw them again ever. They probably didn't survive because of the contaminant levels they have. It's just very much of a mystery. They were seen in Mexico quite a bit as well. They kind of look like small dwarf killer whales. So anyway, lots of interesting things out there that we can't really explain or know much about. And the fifth type of killer whale off California. So these are 5 different types of killer whales that are all off our coastline in different times of year. Some are overlapping ranges, but they don't intermix. These hunt sperm whales. And in fact, I was off the coast of Half Moon Bay off the Pioneer Seamount many years ago doing these aerial surveys from this picture, and we saw on 3 occasions killer whales surrounding and attacking groups of mom-calf sperm whales right off Half Moon Bay, but 70 miles offshore. These killer whales are unusual. They have cookie cutter shark bites on them, probably because they're found offshore, and that's where those cookie cutter sharks live. So they had quite marks on them. They are not predictable. NOAA tried to go and study those sperm whales the following year, and they didn't find them. So they probably move up and down the entire North Pacific in quite offshore waters. So we really don't know much about them. Now, second topic is about culture and intelligence. Culture is a very important part of all killer whales. It's a learned behavior that is passed socially rather than genetically. Different pods have different hunting styles, different languages, prey preferences, traditions. This is an example in Patagonia where killer whales actually beach themselves to catch sea lions. Now, you wouldn't put, if a killer whale from Monterey Bay was put in this water, it would have no idea how to do that. This is something learned from a baby when they're little calves. They learn from their mothers how to do this. It takes years to learn. It's a very dangerous type of method to catch prey. These are the wave washers on the right, where in Antarctica, the killer whales wash the water, make a wave, and knock the seals off the beach. So there's many different hunting techniques that are very unique in different killer whale populations, and that's their culture, transmitted through culture. Culture also involves their vocal dialects. The little ones learn the language of their group through their mother. They learn how to hunt. They learn the migration routes. Play traditions is all part of a learned behavior. In our area, cultural transmission is learning how to hunt gray whales, because in Monterey Bay, killer whales are very specialized in hunting gray whales. Again, if you put a killer whale from a different ocean in here, they would not know how to do that. It takes years and years from them learning as little calves into adults to actually learn how to take down a large whale by working together with the rest of their group. This is the family tree for the killer whales in our, not all the killer whales in our area, because we have about 200 or so transient type, but this are the main the main family that we see most often. Several different nature lines. These red circles on the top are 5 different killer whales. These 5 are the ones that we see most often over the last like 35, 40 years. They're still being seen. And now now we're documenting 5 generations. When I first started as well, there was just like them and maybe they had started to have calves or they hadn't yet. So we were able to follow these over many years, keep track of who's whose the calves are, who's died. So this is like the basis of, learning their social structure and who they travel with, how often calves survive, how often are years between births. So all sorts of things by keeping track of this. And there's 5 key females that have been involved in most of the gray whale attacks. These are the ones that have a range around California, Central California the most, and we see them most often. So they're very successful in that. And just briefly, this is just the killer whale brain, just to say their brain is very complex. They're very intelligent, probably maybe even more so than humans, but of course related to the ocean, which is totally different. We don't understand it all, but parts of their brain have been studied. And from studying these parts of the brain, we know that they're, have a very large brain. They have a folded cortex for processing. They're very powerful social and emotional part of their brain. They have special neurons, like called spindle neurons, that are linked to social intelligence and quick decision making. They have parts of the brain that are specialized for sound and communication, much more complicated than our language. We haven't figured out the vocalizations and what it all means, but I'm sure they have a very complex communication system, we know. They also have parts of the brain to help them navigate. Like, how do they know where to be and where to go in the ocean? They go to hot spots where they're going to find prey. They can't see because the water's murky. They can hear, but not for hundreds of miles. So they're using something in their brain that helps them navigate and know where to be at certain times of year. So it's pretty amazing that they are so intelligent. And they've been in the oceans for about 6 million years, whereas humans are like 300,000 years, just our species. So it's quite a difference. I mean, that's 30 times longer than we've been here, that they have been involved in the ocean to be very complex. And, it's just amazing just how intelligent they are. And signs of their high intelligence includes their long-term family bonds, cooperative hunting, their imitation and learning, play behavior, problem solving, teaching of young, and all these things, we have observed lots of these things, ourselves by watching them. And teaching, mothers will actually release some injured fish for their calves to hunt and learn. They can assist calves in learning to wave wash or other hunting techniques. They can disable sea lions or injure them and let the juveniles go after them. And then the elder females, grandmothers are really important part of the pod to help them navigate. And in Monterey Bay, this is a little calf here, the orange one. They have, like I said, they spend a lot of time teaching their young how to hunt gray whales, which is very complex, but the little ones are right there learning right alongside their moms, even though they're not getting involved in that because it's very dangerous. They practice with birds. Common murres or rhino auklets are quite used for play or practice hunting skills with. And this is a mom CA40 with Emma, her daughter, both of them working together, hunting, and they've been working together for their whole lives, for the young one's whole life. Now this one is a mother too, Emma, and she's a grandmother. This one's a great grandma, and they work together to learn how to teach the rest of the group to hunt gray whale calves. Language of orcas is quite complex, of course. They have lots of clicks, whistles, and pulse calls they make. Anyway, so that's pretty amazing. The calls, we haven't figured it out yet, but someday they will. They're starting to use artificial intelligence, of course, to try to analyze these vocalizations, to try to decipher what they mean. They're kind of using whales as an example to try to, in the future, maybe decipher alien calls or communication. It's almost, similar to that. This happens fast. This is a little video of a dolphin, how killer whales hunt dolphins, toss them up in the air like you saw the other video. These are transients. The other one was the Eastern tropical Pacific type, but they use the same method here of quickly surprising the dolphins and catching them that way. So this is part of the hunting skills and prey that I'm on now. These are all the species of prey that they have been observed in Monterey Bay feeding on. California sea lions are the most observations. Gray whales are the second, but that's a little biased because gray whales, it takes several hours sometimes for them to hunt a gray whale, and they could feed on the gray whale for actually several days, whereas catching a porpoise or one of the smaller pinnipeds, it's very quick, just like minutes, and we could easily miss that. So I'm sure they catch a lot of these other animals more often than we actually see. It's just that it's so much time for a gray whale. That's why it looks so high. We have had 116 observations over the years of them hunting gray whales. And of course, they all have their little albatross pet along with them, which almost seems like it because albatross will often follow killer whales. Albatross are real beautiful birds with a 6-foot wingspan. They nest in the Hawaiian Islands and they're opportunistic predators, scavengers actually, and they will follow killer whales a lot of the times, waiting for them to hunt something, and then they'll all be there. Sometimes there's 20 or 30 albatross all taking advantage of the prey. Um, and also, when they're hunting, killer whales hunt quietly. They don't make vocalizations like you heard. That's saved for later. They're very quiet, but they can communicate still because they need to communicate what they're doing without alerting the prey. So they use ultrasonic sounds or cues in their emotions. They coordinate their behavior without making sounds. So they hunt very silently. Then after they attack and kill something, they become very vocal. Very excited calls are made at that point. Again, here are the examples of different types of hunting. This is again, the dolphin is very common to toss it in the air. They also can chase dolphins like 20, 30 miles an hour for quick bursts and catch one, kind of grab it. Sea lions, this is a sea lion being hit from upside down by the killer whale fluke. They can whack them, which is what they do. They injure them. And they also spend quite a long time hunting sea lions because, especially if they have calves in the group, and that gives the calves a chance to learn how to hunt. Calves are juvenile, so they prolong the sea lion hunt often for that reason, and they'll give the youngsters more time. So this is just a quick video. These videos are from the drone. From a drone, we can see things much more than we can from the boat. The drone has been a really amazing tool to use that's really increased our ability to understand behaviors and see what's going on that you can't see from a boat a lot of time. So here's a mom and a youngster, a juvenile kind of taking turns with this. There's the young one, the juvenile there. And she was prolonging this attack so that the little one, the youngster, would have a chance to practice and catching it on its own. Because the youngsters of the female killer whale will not be on her own until she has her own calves. So she's with her mother for like 10 to 15 years before she might separate. And that's a long time. It takes that long to learn these skills. Here's several of them getting together and they're practicing here with a sea lion. And there's the end of that. And the elephant seals, this is a wiener elephant seal. Elephant seals are easier to catch. They don't bite like sea lions can. They really don't prolong it too much with elephant seals. It happens very quick. And gray whales, they're specialized for hunting gray whales, at least in Monterey Bay area, or some of the killer whales along the West Coast, because they also catch gray whales other areas besides Monterey Bay, like up in the Aleutian Islands as well. But this is a very much learned technique. Here's the gray whales. They spend the winter off Baja California and they migrate all the way up to Alaska and the Bering Sea. Unfortunately, the gray whale population is down now to about 13,000 from about 27,000 just about 9, 10 years ago. And that's probably because global warming, climate change has caused their prey to drastically decrease. So a lot of the gray whales have been skinny and have died off. And of course, that affects having less calves as well. So that is happening right now with the gray whale population. But Monterey Bay does provide an advantage for killer whales hunting gray whales. Look at the canyon that goes all the way in the bay. The mom calf gray whales hug the shoreline. As they're coming up the coast, they hug the shoreline and they have to cross the canyon here, across this deep water, and that takes them into a danger zone. Killer whales will often patrol east and west along the edge of the canyon, and they intercept the gray whale calves that way. There's not that many gray whale calves coming through per day, even on a good year when there's more calves born. There might be just a few. So they have to spend time going back and forth looking if they're going to target a gray whale. The gray whales sometimes will start making vocalizations like knocking sounds like knocking on wood as they're coming up onto the shallow shelf to help them navigate. And killer whales can hear that and listen for them. Killer whales can often be spread out in maybe 3 or 4 groups some days over a wide area. And when one group finds a gray whale cow calf, the others will come porpoising in from the distance that you'll see quite often. So Monterey Bay is a unique area, and that's why we have seen so many predation events here. When it does happen, they can sometimes hear a mom calf gray whale. I've seen it from a couple miles away. We won't even know that the gray whales are there. In fact, we hardly ever know that the gray whale mom calf is in the area. We don't see them because they're snorkel blowing. They're not making a lot of sound. They're trying to sneak across the bay. So we don't even see them. But the killer whales do, and they can find them from, it's amazing. Like I've seen them 2 miles away and they still can detect them, which is probably echolocation or the sounds they hear from the gray whales. So they all start chasing after them all of a sudden. You'll see the killer whales just slowly traveling. Then they will all simultaneously take off after the gray whales. Once they catch up to them, they pounce on them. And it's the adult reproductive females of the group. Like there might be a couple groups involved, and it's only just a few killer whales that are doing most of the work. And those are the adult females. There's lots of ramming and bashing in this. Of course, this is, part of nature. This is what they eat. This is from a drone. The gray whale calf does try to get on its mother's back. Of course, that doesn't last very long. The only way they can escape is if the mother can get to shore. If she can get in shallow water, then she can escape, which does happen sometimes. Other times, though, the killer whales are mostly successful. They will actually get on top of the whales to try to hold them down. This is a male killer whale biting the tongue of the gray whale. Males will get involved only if it's just a small group, like if it's just their mother and their siblings, then the males will actually do some work, but most of the time it's the females that do it all. Again, spend a lot of time just trying to push them down. And once they do kill the gray whale calf, then they do feed on it. And they can feed on it. The longest we've seen is 4 days, which has been sometimes the same group of killer whales, but then often other groups of killer whales will come in like the next day or during that time period. So one gray whale calf can feed many groups of killer whales. Like the most we've seen has been like almost 50 killer whales of different matrilines coming in to feed on the gray whale. And it's a myth that they eat only the tongue. They don't eat only the tongue. You can see they're taking strips of blubber, getting right inside the carcass. The mouth is open, so that's what they're entering the carcass with. So they have to open the mouth, so they feed on the tongue, and then they start stripping pieces of blubber off like this. This is the carcass that was left after the killer whales were finished. It depends how many killer whales are present and how often they've eaten as far as how much of the gray whale will be left. Sometimes the entire carcass is gone, and other times it's like this, which is some blubber gone and the tongue missing. This is just, I'll just show just a little bit of this. This is the hunt. This is from a drone. Since we started using drones several years ago, we really can understand more about how the killer whales are working together and what roles they're playing. So one killer whale will be the separator and in between the mom and calf. Others are spending time, on the outside circling it. And like I said, it's really only a few adult females that are doing most of the work. There might be 4 killer whales that are doing most of this attack, and there could be 20 killer whales in the group that are hanging around the edge with youngsters and males kind of just waiting and watching. The youngsters get right involved, not working on it, but they get close and they can see what's going on. So this can go on for quite a long time. Sometimes up to 2 hours is pretty average. 15 minutes has been the fastest for some killer whales that have gotten very good at this. This is the location of the predation events in the bay. A lot of it's over the canyon edge. Some years, the killer whales in recent years have gotten so good at it. The gray whales were almost hunted to extinction and they have recovered since the 1970s. So there was probably a time when the killer whales were not getting many gray whales, if any, and they had to learn to hunt them again. So, like in 1998, it was attacked, took 6 hours. In recent years, the fastest, like I said, is 15 minutes. So they were able to catch the gray whale calves as soon as they left the protection of shore here. They're hugging the shore. They have to cross the bay to get across. They do not go around. It's very rare to actually make this turn. It's just not in their nature. They want to keep going north unless it's a very experienced mother who sometimes might do this and seek the protection of shore. But for the most part, they go across like this. The adult gray whales come across way out, much further out when they're crossing, but the mom and calves are going by shore and then coming across the bay. The killer whales can get them as soon as they leave the protection of shore here, or they get them over the canyon as they're starting to make the knocking sounds when they come up to the shallow water. There's a difference in the number of calves that are born each year. And as I mentioned, right now, the population of gray whales is about 13,000. You can see how it's fluctuated over the years. There's been very high years when it was up to almost 27,000. And of course, the number of calves born reflects that too. It's been changing, like some years high, low, high year. We had another low period of gray whale calves in the 1999, 2000 period. Then the gray whales went up again. I'm not sure what's going to happen now because of climate change. We don't know if it's going to go back up or not because of the food shortage. But the number of attacks is very much associated with the number of calves born. And this, now that maybe they're not getting as many calves, they can actually go for juveniles or adults. This is the first time a few years ago we actually saw them go for a juvenile subadult gray whale. These are subadults, not calves. Before that, all our observations, every single one of them was on calves. So this was something new. So this means, and they did get this one, that yes, they can maybe try and get some of the older whales because they are so focused and it's an important food source for them at certain times of year in the spring. Like right now, we're coming up to the time of year where killer whales could be hunting gray whale calves. The first mom calf gray whale was just seen in Southern California, and they'll be seen through April and May. So we're out there every day. We actually have trips that are all day long that we go out in search of killer whales and look at, anything we find. Right now is a great time to see humpbacks as well. But this group there was about 30 killer whales in this group that were going after these adult gray whales. Here comes this big group right here, all synchronized together. And more killer whales seem to be involved in this case because it was an adult or subadult and not a calf here. Something interesting happens when killer whales are attacking gray whales or sea lions or other prey, not all the time, but because there's a lot of humpbacks in Monterey Bay, it's a big feeding area that overlaps often where the killer whales are hunting their prey, that when humpbacks detect killer whales hunting, they can hear them from several miles away. They'll often, different humpbacks will come charging over, trying to interfere, and they try to stop the attack. And if they've killed the prey, they will actually hover over the carcass and try to keep the killer whales away from it. So it's a really common thing that happens nowadays. And we all wrote a paper on this almost 10 years ago. Worldwide events. It's not just in Monterey Bay, but throughout the world. This has been observed by humpback whales exhibiting this behavior of saving other animals. And it could be because killer whales are their predator, not when they're adults here, but when they're calves in Mexico. That's where humpbacks are born, in Mexico, and killer whales do hunt them down there. So they could be just responding to their predator. Otherwise, it's a real mystery because other large whales are quite scared of killer whales. Here is an example briefly of a minke whale. This is a minke whale swimming with the killer whale, not for fun or play. It's actually a predation event. And here's the minke whale. It's a young minke whale. It's actually a little smaller than this female killer whale. And since they can hunt other baleen whales as well, if the gray whale calves are not there, they can get the adults or other species of whales. So here's the minke whale that is going to be taken. So this was done again by drone. We wouldn't have seen what was going on so well without that drone. Here is a blue whale, and this wasn't an attack. This was kind of a harassment, but killer whales have been known to hunt blue whales, even adults. So here's this group of killer whales that are just going to come over, and blue whales are big scaredy cats compared to humpbacks, and this one is going to flee, and it fled at full speed. We couldn't even keep up with it for about 3 miles till it got to near shore in Carmel Bay. So blue whales are very frightened of killer whales. And this is an example of a matriline. This is Emma. She's our best hunter. She's the one that has, with her family, killed a gray whale calf in 15 minutes, whereas others take a couple hours. So this is her offspring as well. She's a grandma. So this is her matriline. Now it's changed a little bit as her daughter has formed her own family. So during a predation event, there's many different matrilines. There could be up to 10 different family groups, matrilines or family groups, similar are working together to take down the gray whale. So 3 is the most common. And when they're not hunting the gray whale, then they're just on their own. And this shows the number of matrilines on the bottom. So we've had 28 different matrilines or family groups hunting gray whale calves, but you can see there's just a few that are most involved. So like over 80% of our attacks on gray whales over the years have been with a smaller percentage of killer whales. These are the ones I showed you the family tree of, the ones we see more often that have a range probably central in this area. The other killer whales that have been involved probably range further up. And these are the ones that are best at hunting gray whales, are the ones that can do it the best. They probably, lived in Monterey Bay and are very familiar with it over many years and have passed it on to their offspring. So now the red is the matriarch and the yellow is their offspring or their daughter. So this family, the daughter has learned from its mother and now has its own family and is also highly involved in predation events. So there's, again, how they learn and transmit that through the generations. This, don't pay attention too much. This is a timeline. This shows the number of days during April or May. And this is the number of killer whale attacks on gray whale. So here's the first one, second, third. These are different family groups or matrilines. Each letter is a different matriline. So group A was involved in several attacks and mixed with different family groups. You can see lots of mixing. The same killer whale groups were feeding on multiple gray whales over a short period of time. Here, group C, same thing, mixed with other family groups. 1, 2, 3, 6 different family groups here. She's with 2 here. So there's quite a lot of variation of different groups coming in. This was in 2004 when the number of calves was some of the highest we've ever seen in all these years. 559 calves were estimated compared to like maybe 30 last year or less. And the number of attacks were correlated, of course, to the time when the peak number of calves were coming through, April and May. So they are binge feeding. You can see that they eat a lot in a short period of time, and they can probably go for a while without feeding as well. So this is a very important food source, you can see, for all these different groups of killer whales that are involved. And now we're talking about the habitat and their movements. So again, here's Monterey Bay. You can see the canyon, how it comes in so close to shore. And in other areas, the killer whales are generally out along the edge of the canyon, the shelf edge, so out here more. But they come all the way in closer to Monterey. That's why it's such a unique area. Not just killer whales, but other whales, of course, are seen much closer. Humpbacks feed all close to shore here, and dolphins. So it's unique because of the canyon. This, again, is the killer whale group. This is one different whale that has been seen off the Channel Islands off Southern California, where there's a huge population of pinnipeds. Here they hit the hot spots as they're traveling up and down the coast. So the same group of killer whales might spend a day or two in the Channel Islands, then go to Monterey Bay, maybe hit the Farallon. So they're traveling between hot spots of where the prey is most abundant. They go up to British Columbia and Washington. They've been seen mixing with killer whales that are most often seen up in British Columbia that don't come down to Monterey Bay. And our killer whales seem to go north more than it's the other way around. And the killer whales that are up in this area seem to stay up here more. And the ones we have all been up to British Columbia. So they might do that so they can mate with animals they're not related to. So it's not unusual to see some California whales up in Washington or British Columbia mixed with the whales that are seen up there. And the Channel Islands, Ryan Lawry has been doing trips out to the Channel Islands, and they do see killer whales here around these pinniped rookeries, or usually further offshore. But obviously, the killer whales will frequent the Channel Islands, which is quite a ways offshore. And that's where lots of elephant seals, thousands of elephant seals and sea lions breed. I was here last month and went down there to see, and the killer whales we saw went by this elephant seal rookery right here. And it's breeding season for the elephant seals, so it makes sense that their predator would be there as well. So this is just the overall map of all of the killer whales, the five probable ecotypes. Here's the offshore transients. They probably range. Some of the ones in the Aleutians have the cookie cutter shark mark bites on them. They tagged a killer whale in the Aleutians and it went south. So these are probably the ones that specialize in sperm whales that roam all up and down this area, sometimes coming into Monterey a little closer. The ones from Mexico, the ETPs, have ventured up to Southern California. So these different ecotypes all have this overlapping range, but they really never intermix. They don't associate, they never would breed together. And it, of course, goes all the way through the Aleutians, the resident and transients, to Russia. And I did go to Russia and I saw the resident killer whales off Kamchatka. This area is a transient area, and Bowhead's is part of Russia. Unfortunately, these are being caught for the aquarium industry in Asia. And then I did go to Japan several times to see killer whales here off northern Hokkaido. Those are also resident and transient, so they extend all the way across the Pacific. This just shows some of the global distribution of what's going on in the world with killer whales. There's lots of places killer whales are being studied now. Patagonia is where they beach themselves. This is in the British Columbia. Of course, they're quite common to see residents and transients there. Antarctica, the five different types, wave washers are there. And Southeast Alaska, I used to work there for many years, really beautiful. Again, you can see quite a few killer whales to study. This is in Norway, where the killer whales specialize on herring. I've been there too. You can swim with them, which I tried too during the winter in the fjords. The herring, you have to go there in the winter when there's not much light, but it's an interesting place to go. Eastern tropical Pacific, killer whales don't have much of a saddle patch in the tropics. They look quite a bit different. And this is San Juan Islands. This is where killer whales have been studied the longest for probably over 50 years. Started with Ken Balcom in this area, in the San Juan Islands. Here's New Zealand. Ingrid Visser still studies the long-term killer whale population there. And Mexico, this has become very popular lately with social media because of the Mabula rays that congregate in these big numbers, like in May and June, April or May, that period. And the killer whales will often feed on those rays. And people are now flocking to Mexico, going out in many different boats, looking for killer whales, and they're getting in the water with them. So it's become kind of almost too many boats involved lately. But that's what's happening because it's transmitted on social media. Crozet Islands, subantarctic islands, where this group of killer whales used to beach itself as well, but unfortunately the fishermen pretty much killed them all because they do get involved in fishery interactions with the long lines. And once they lost that beaching ability, that was thousands of years of evolution to pass that on. They've lost it for good now. They don't do that anymore. The killer whales that did that and taught it are no longer. And the Aleutian Islands, there's 1,000 resident killer whales just everywhere. I was up there too during surveys, and the killer whales are very abundant in the Aleutians, both types. And this is Strait of Gibraltar. This is where the bluefin tuna go. This is where we had the Marine Mammal Killer Whale Conference last year. We all went to there, but it wasn't at the time of year when the killer whales were there, unfortunately. But they do eat bluefin tuna, and actually they've learned to catch them off the lines, off long lines in this area. And killer whales are so smart that they figured out how to tell if the line has a fish on it, one of these big fish, because they actually touch the line, like they touch it with their body. And if it feels really taut, they know that there's a fish on it and they'll dive very deep to catch it. But if it's not taut, they don't even bother to dive. So they figured that out, which is pretty amazing. And somebody figured out what they were doing. And here off Russia, I was there as well to see I saw the resident type of killer whales off Kamchatka. It's a great place where they study them. There's people that study the killer whales in Russia. This is in Iceland. Again, they specialize in herring there. People are studying big study of killer whales in Iceland as well, besides Norway. Monterey Bay, of course, where we are with the gray whales and year-round killer whales. This is Hokkaido, Japan. And Australia is a new area, not a new for killer whales, but new for people. Like within the last 10 years, there's boats that go out to Bremer Canyon, which is about 40 miles from shore. And it's very windy and rough every day, but they see killer whales almost every day. So I'm looking to go there pretty hopefully next year. And they see killer whales up in this area as well, northern Australia, and they're specializing on hunting the humpback babies in this area because they're so abundant. The population of humpbacks has really exploded all over the world, and there's so many calves here that the killer whales are catching them quite easily. Humpback killer whales on the East Coast are starting to be studied as well. So that's Australia, and then Japan is the last area that has research as well. Besides other areas in the Arctic, killer whales, the ice is melting, so killer whales have started to use this area to catch belugas and narwhals where they never got to have access before. So some areas is positive with the climate change. Killer whales are having more access to prey now because of that melting ice. And of course, there's other places in the world. Killer whales are found worldwide, and you hear reports because of social media now of all kinds of places. Indian Ocean, I mean, pretty much everywhere. There's sightings of killer whales off South Africa. They're not as studied as easily because they're unpredictable, but they are feeding on white sharks down here. Um, Now I'm into genetics and the family groups. So killer whales, of course, live in some of the strongest family structures of the animal kingdom. They're so social. Killer whales would just not be living alone, be very rare, especially for a female. Sometimes males may travel alone, but they do mix with other animals. The offspring stay with their mothers for life, and pods are centered around matrilines. Family is very important for how orcas survive. And this is a diagram I made up for our killer whales off California based on our knowledge. This is the matriline. Here's the female with her offspring, her son, and her daughters. So when her daughter starts having her own offspring, then the daughter will break off and form its own matriline. That's how the groups stay small. They don't want to be large because it's not efficient. They're not hunting fish, they're hunting mammals, so they can't keep getting larger and larger. But they still will associate together with their mother from time to time. They don't totally abandon them, but they do form their own group because now this female is old enough after having her first one or two calves, she'll form her own group, and she's learned from like 15 to 20 years from living with her mother and oftentimes her grandmother how to hunt and how to live on her own and catch prey. The males, though, will stay with their mom their whole life, pretty much, we think. So far, they have. Males, if they lose their mother, these two males will either travel alone or together. And this is a group of older females. If they are old and both their sons have died or their females have dispersed, then they often will travel together. Postmenopausal groups. And then this is the common group to see a female with her son. And sometimes only one son may survive longer because she does put a lot of energy into her firstborn son from other studies, it sounds like. And that's what we see here. One female with one son. Her daughters have dispersed and made their own families, so she'll stay with her son as long as he's alive. And actually, if the mother dies, that son will not have a good chance of survival because they really depend on their mothers, very much so. So if the male's mother dies, he has a good chance of not surviving as well. Grandmothers, of course, are very important. This is our group, the 27s, a big group, very successful group. Grandma, great grandma, this one, 27. And so she's the leader, teaches the others how to hunt and guides the pod into feeding areas that maybe they don't know about. They definitely increases the chance of survival for the calves to have a grandmother present. Very important part of the group. This is a group we've called the Golden Girls, three postmenopausal females, very synchronous. Look at that, how together they are. They will travel together often, but then they also will mix with other whales periodically too. All their offspring, their sons have probably died because the males don't live as long. These are very old females, and their daughters have formed their own groups. Again, here's our family tree of our most common killer whales that we've seen. And these are grandmothers and great grandmothers. You can see they've been very successful. This group has had no grandmother and they're not doing very well. That could be one of the reasons. So these are killer whales that we see most often. Again, the ones that are best gray whale hunters that have a focus around Monterey Bay. The black ones are the ones that have died. The red are the females, the reproductive females that do most of the hunting. And the purple are males. And then we just keep adding to this family tree. So the way they're named, this is 140. When she has offspring, it's A, B, C, D. And when her offspring has a kid, again, her grandkid, it's 140 B1, B2. And if this one has a kid, it's going to be B1A. So as you get down the generations, the names get quite long. Here now in behavior and social complexity, of course, killer whales are more than just predators. They're very much social beings. They show play, coordination, food sharing, caregiving, synchronized behavior, long-term social bonds. Here is sharing prey. This is a female and her offspring from a drone. And Evan has taken a lot of our drone, as well as Connor. And Jason, we've had Mike, several drone operators that have been very helpful because you can learn so much from the drone. Here's a mother sharing prey. Pretty much the females always share prey, but the males, from other studies, they found that they really don't. They only share with their mother. Here's the bird, the common murre. The birds that can't fly very well. This is again that the mothers teach their young how to hunt by practicing with birds, and the young love to chase the birds. Here, this is prey sharing. And here, right there, that piece was turned and given to that one. It happened very quick. It was just a little piece. It will happen one more time. They just turn their head and pass the piece of prey to the other whale. We only can see this from the drone. And so I'll just show you the next time it comes pretty much in just a little bit here, not very long, but you have to look quick because it happens fast and it's a small piece of prey. It's being passed around. And I'm not sure here, it's going to be this one is going to turn its head right there. And there's a little piece that went to the other calf. So that's very interesting how they do that. Of course, they're very social. Sometimes they can spend the whole day socializing, but other times we might just see them traveling for days and days and not doing anything else. Some days you see them engaged in this amazing activity, and other days they're just zigzagging and resting, and you can't see them very well. But this reminds me of little youngsters, kind of like puppies. These are all young that are kind of rubbing together. This is a youngster that is being pushed around by the adults, not in any aggressive way, but very gently, spending a lot of time rubbing and rolling together. This is a male as part of their social behavior, not sexual behavior for mating, but the adult males do this with other younger males. That's just part of their way of life. And it's not for breeding, of course, but some social dominance possibly. This is a cuddle puddle, we call it, when they rub together. And this is just briefly, this is going to be them carrying prey here, and then they're going to knock a salmon in the air just for the heck of it. They're not feeding on salmon, these are transients, but it's part of their play behavior. So this will, here's the salmon, and it gets knocked in the air. So that's just for complete fun. It's pretty amazing they can do that. And then they're going to chase some birds. I'll just show a few because I don't have too much time. There's a male breaching from the drone perspective. And here are, pretty soon they're going to be chasing a few birds. And the chase for the birds can go on for quite a while. The young love to chase these birds. And they also practice hunting them. Here they turn just on a dime and going right after these common murres who can't fly very well, trying to hit them with their flukes, knock them in the air. There's the bird. And sometimes they'll actually swallow them, but it's not their main food, of course. It's for play. So here they go after them. And anyway, research and technology, I'm just almost finished here. This is part of all studies is photo ID to identify them by their markings, saddle patch and dorsal fin. We also have collected biopsy samples over the years to look at genetics and chemical contaminants. Of course, we use drones, and we have used eDNA, which is a non-invasive, just collecting pieces of skin behind the whale when it surfaces. This is our long-term study. We use both whale watch trips, my Monterey Bay Whale Watch, and also we have dedicated surveys we can do on smaller boats. These are all the sightings over long-term where killer whales have been very associated with the canyon. And we do long-term behavioral observations out in the boat every day during April and May, because that's when killer whales are here more often. Like coming up right now, in fact, we saw killer whales today. I wasn't out, but they were here today. So they're starting to show up more now as the time of year that we do see them more often. Some of the threats, of course, are killer whales, climate change, contaminants, fisheries interactions, prey decline. So we need to look at this if we want to help study them and protect them. Of course, now they're being caught for the Chinese aquarium industry. These are all transient killer whales from Russia. They're taking out of one particular location a very small group of transients, unfortunately, to these big, huge aquariums in China. This is from some of the biopsy work I did. They have very high chemical contaminants in them, PCBs and DDTs, very high off California and some other areas in the world too. And that's because the chemicals were dumped off California, which makes them much higher in the 1950s and 60s. And they never biodegrade, and they're bad for their immune system, reproductive system. So unfortunately, the females pass those chemicals on to the young, and the males can never get rid of them. So that could be one of the reasons the males may not live as long. So just in summary, just finishing up, they're just one species, but they have different ecotypes. They're very emotionally complex brains. They have different languages, cultural traditions. They're amazing hunters, and they have inventive strategies like wave washing, shark flipping, salmon herding. They have family bonds that last a lifetime. Grandmothers are leaders and teachers. They have exhibited empathy, mourning, and there's been a paper published where they're actually offered prey to humans. I had that happen many years ago when we were in a small boat in Monterey Bay, and a killer whale caught a salmon, a transient, which they don't eat salmon, came right over to our boat and dropped it alongside of us. So that's what the paper was about. And they're found in all the oceans. They're masters of play and innovation. They can play with kelp, invent social games. Now they're starting to use salmon hats. They put a salmon on top of their head and the others imitate them. So one does it and the others follow. Self-recognition, they've learned that in captivity. They're apex predators. Humans have never been harmed by them, and they've been in the water with them quite a bit. Cultural diversity, which is similar to human society with their dialects. And lastly, there's some of the new information about them. So I mentioned the Arctic waters are starting to melt more, so they have more access to belugas and narwhals, more prey. Some killer whales from Eastern Pacific are heading to Southern California with the warmer waters. Gray whale numbers have been reduced, unfortunately, because of global warming, which could affect the killer whales. Boat interference, you may have heard about all the boat strikes off Gibraltar of killer whales ramming boats, and that's just pure play. It's pretty obvious it's just play. They're trying to get the rudder off the boat, and that's the game. And they passed it on to the other killer whales, but it's not very fun to be in a sailboat crossing that area now. Some of their innovative hunting techniques, like sharks in Mexico, killer whales in Mexico have learned to turn sharks over to immobilize them. Two killer whales in South Africa, two males have pretty much been responsible for the disappearance of great white sharks off South Africa, where they used to dive with them. And now there's quite a bit of depredation on long lines, where killer whales have learned to take fish off long lines throughout the entire world, just about. Now we're using drones. We're learning much more. They've just recently discovered that killer whales some use kelp, and they break off pieces of kelp, hold it between their bodies, and rub each other like they're getting a massage. And drones has caused our increase in information greatly about this. Killer whales have complex communication systems that could be mistaken for telepathy, or it's not been determined. They may even have telepathy, some people think. And lastly, killer whales have dropped prey, as I mentioned, near people. They've been unfortunately captured in Russia for aquariums in Japan is a big problem. Orcas reported to have rescued dogs, and people have said that killer whales have led them out of the fog. So, that's true. And so can we save them? Because there's lots of things to worry about in the oceans. And we hope we can in the future, that they will always be here. And that is it. And thank you very much. This is our information from our nonprofit research group and the Whale Watch. We'd love to see you come out. I'm going to be driving the boat on Sunday, and it'd be great to see some of you out there with us, looking, of course, for killer whales as well. So thank you.
Wow, thank you, Nancy. Just, gosh, some of those photos. And so I know we have a lot of questions, and I think Firuze is going to moderate.
Thank you so much, Susan, and thank you so much, Nancy, for this amazing presentation. We have a lot of questions, so I just started now. First question is, what are the prospects for fighting back against today's Extinction Committee action?
Wait, say that again.
What are the prospects for fighting back against today's Extinction Committee action?
Against extinction?
I,
Well,
I
I,
think this is a
I think what they're referring to regards the weakening of the Endangered Species Act,
oh, right, right.
something politically that just another blow. But
Yeah, I
they're
mean, I
they're
don't know what we
trying
can do about that, but the southern
to
resident killer
vote.
whales are the ones that really need protection. And, of course, that could be a problem. There's three dams that need to be taken down, and that's been very political. And they were hoping to ask Obama about that while he was still president, and it never happened, and now it probably won't. But yes, I mean, that is a big factor that it could be worse for the whales now.
Yeah. So, was it a transient group going after the gray whales last week in Monterey Bay? Do you have a
Yes, it's always a transient group that hunts the mammals because the others either hunt sharks or only fish. The residents only hunt fish.
I see. Another question is what defines an ecotype? Genetics and behavior or any other factor?
Yes, both genetics. They are that's the main thing. They're definitely different genetically. It's almost like they're from different oceans. Transients are the most distinct. Like they could be from just the same as killer whales from a different ocean. They're so different. So genetics is the main thing that distinguishes it, but also behavior. They have different prey preferences. They look different, their body shape and coloration is different. And so in different areas of the world, we're discovering more that there's these different types of killer whales. Some areas there may not be, like they're in tropics, they may be more generalists where there's not different types, but they, are opportunistic, feeding on both mammals and fish, which happens in some areas.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense. Um, do different groups types ever breed with one another?
No, they have never seen them breed with one another or interact. Behaviorally, they're pretty much separate. In fact, the residents get quite aggressive sometimes towards transients if they get close to them, but they've never been seen mingling or associating in any way at all.
That's interesting. Um, and how about the big smatcher lines? Are they get back together on a regular basis?
Well, yeah, symmetra lines do get back together. Like if if a daughter leaves her mother's group because she has her own offspring, they will travel on their own a lot of times, but then we'll often see them back with their mother's group, sometimes hunting larger whales. They'll be back with their mother's group temporarily. So they go back temporarily and then back on their own again. So they don't leave them permanently for good, but they do associate.
Yeah, so I think it depends on time and circumstances.
Right? Just like when you go visit your own mother when you don't live with them anymore.
Yeah. So, yeah, is there a book that you can recommend that contains all of this amazing information?
No, it's going to be me. I'm going to write the book.
Yay!
Uh,
That's a huge news.
yeah,
So when do you think that you may finish?
I don't know, several years, maybe, hopefully sooner.
Make it as soon as possible. We are all waiting for it. Um, so another question is there a concern about long-time effects of the avian flu now hitting the seal
Oh, yes,
numbers at Ano Nuevo, and since pigs eat marine mammals
yes.
could be affected?
I mean, that's certainly possible. Wonder about that because now it's in the elephant seals right off our coast. They've found the flu in the elephant seals, and the killer whales eat the elephant seals. So I haven't heard of any whales that have picked it up yet, but it is a worry. Yeah, it's a concern. That's something totally new.
Yeah, that's a big
It's
concern.
possible. I hope it doesn't happen, but
Well, we hope not. And well, I hope it will stop at one moment. that we don't know anytime soon or not. So, is it possible for pods to learn from another pod the behaviors? For example, orcas attacking sailboats in the Gibraltar Strait. I think you.
Yeah, well, they have, well, just in that area with that population of killer whales, it has transmitted. Like it started with maybe one or two whales, they think, based on the people that have lived there, one or two whales, and now has expanded out to most of the population. It's a small population of whales in that area anyway. They're very endangered because they've been hunted by fishermen there and had a hard time. But it has spread to most of them. Yeah, so that other groups have picked it up from each other.
Yeah, I think if I'm not wrong, there are 15 or 16 living group.
It's a little higher than that, I think, but I don't think much more than 30 or 40.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a small population,
it's a small
but they
population.
still have calves, so hopefully it'll still be able to continue on.
Yeah. Just out of curiosity, do you know the contamination in that part of the world? Is it?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of, there's like 14 areas in the world that have very high contamination levels that have been sampled so far. Not all areas of the world have been sampled, but yeah, that's a high area too because of the location and the Mediterranean, there's lots of pollution there. And tuna, bluefin tuna are high up in the food chain as well. So the transients are very polluted higher because they're feeding high in the food chain, whereas
Yeah,
the residents eating fish have a little bit less because the food chain is not as high. But all killer whales, even the residents, have contaminants in them. That's something that's universal for all killer whales. Just some are very much higher than others. And there's somebody that wrote a paper of these populations of killer whales that they're predicting they may not survive. That's why I wrote, Can we save them? They may not survive down the line from many years from now because of those contaminant levels.
yeah, yeah. That's a big concern.
Some countries still use those chemicals, even though we banned PCBs and DDTs in the 1970s. The problem is they're not biodegradable. They stay in the ocean and they continue to go through the food chain. However, there's some countries like Asia, those countries, they still use those chemicals and they come through the atmosphere and blow over our way as well, or they blow other areas of the world for other killer whales to get, or
Yeah.
other animals.
Hey, staying on the toxicity, Nancy, you mentioned that males, I think you mentioned that they have higher levels of toxicity than females.
Yes.
Is, is that something to do with giving birth or, I mean,
It's because the females pass on those chemicals to their calves. So it goes through their milk into their calves. So they actually can get rid of the chemicals the more calves they have. The firstborn calf, unfortunately, may not survive because it gets the full load of the chemicals from its mother. Then after that, the less through the other calves. But the males, obviously not having calves, so they have nowhere to dump the chemicals. They just keep going higher and higher and higher.
wow.
Wow.
You mentioned that the mortality, sorry, but while we're talking on this, the mortality for calves is 50%.
Yeah, 40 to 50% is pretty high, and that's pretty much true for all killer whales.
And okay. I mean, I'm just wondering, is it even over like as long as you've been studying this,
That's what has been reported. Like it used to be 40%. Now they're saying 50%. So, I mean, a lot of it could be from the chemicals. These chemicals have been around since everybody's been studying killer whales. So we don't know how it was before that because nobody was studying killer whales back in before the 1950s or 60s when these chemicals were really predominant here.
okay.
And now they're still used. I mean, other countries still use them. So, we'd have to stop using them all over the place and then figure out a way to somehow get them off the bottom of the ocean.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Another question is about humpback babies, especially one of our listeners has a season in Cabo and they witnessed with showing off killer whale chases after humpback babies. And in the past, they saw lots of events like this in January and February, but not so much this year due to killer whale appearances in the area. So, do you have any opinion about that?
So you said they didn't see them as much this year. They didn't see as many humpback calves this year because killer whales were in the area. Is that what it said?
So, in the past, we saw lots of humpbacks in January and February.
Oh, so the killer whales were there this year, I see. So maybe that's why the humpbacks weren't there.
Yeah,
But I mean, from what we've seen up in our area, the humpbacks are not afraid of killer whales, and the population is the same humpbacks down there that come to California. But maybe it was because the calves are born in Mexico, and maybe they want to move away from the killer whales, of course, when they have calves, and that is a calving area. So that would make sense if killer whales were there, then the humpbacks that have calves, because that is a breeding area, would, go somewhere else because the killer whales are known to attack humpback calves in Mexico.
oh yeah,
Not our killer whales, not the same ones that we see here in our population, but different killer whales do get the humpback calves in Mexico.
yeah. So the our listener just made a comment, and she says the humpbacks were there, but hiding the babies.
Oh, right. Yeah,
Yeah,
they should hide the babies because killer whales do go after those little humpback babies, unfortunately. They go after them when they're very young in other
yeah,
places in the world too, whereas the gray whale calves are born in Mexico in those lagoons, and that seems to be very safe because killer whales really don't. It's only been like one time or a couple times that killer whales have ever gone inside those very protected lagoons. So the gray whales have found a very safe place to give birth, and they stay in those lagoons, for about 3 months until the calves are ready to make that migration. So the killer whales really don't get the gray whale calves when they're tiny, like they do the humpback calves. But unfortunately, they do get the gray whale calves when they're 3 or 4 months old, once they start their migration.
yeah,
But
yeah,
maybe it gives them a better chance because they are, a little bit larger by then to some extent. But it's really depends on the mother, how well the mother is trying to get her calf to shore and how close to shore she stays to avoid the killer whales.
yeah. So what do you think about the orca sightings in the Sea of Cortez? You mentioned that there are a lot of boats out there.
Yes, I mean that since it's been on social media a lot, social media is like exploding with, everything about every topic. So now there's been a lot of pictures about killer whales in the Sea of Cortez, and people are being offered trips to go swim with them. Has become very popular. Some people have done that, but most of the time it's hard to find the killer whales. You're not guaranteed to see them anyway if you go down there. Because they are hard to find. There's been a few people that have seen them and have gotten in the water with them, but there's a lot of boats now, I hear. I haven't been down there at the right time to see that, but my people I know have, and they said it's very crowded. Some maybe regulations need to be put in place because there's so many boats that now, as soon as there's a killer whale sighting, all these massive boats with people come over to it, and it's kind of, ruins the situation.
And I think it's also bad for the gray whales as well because of the noise
Well,
pollution.
it's actually in Sea Cortez, it's the killer whales that they're trying to rush over and, um,
So,
see.
okay, yeah.
They're
Uh,
trying to swim with the killer whales and see the killer whales feeding on those Mabula rays because in the spring those rays, a type of ray, gathers in huge groups like when
yeah,
they're mating, and sometimes killer whales will feed, or they do feed on those rays, but there's many different groups of those Mabula rays. So just because you see a group of Mabula rays doesn't mean the killer whales will be there. You have to find the right group of rays. So when they do find the killer whales with the rays, or even just see killer whales, then they tell, all the other boats hear about it. There's so many tours that have been exploding down there recent years. Like, I've seen how it's increased quite a bit with the number of boats, operators offering trips to see these killer whales, but like they're, hard to find. So it's not like it's easy to see them, but when they do find them, then, it's a lot of boats in one situation for killer whales.
yeah. Um, so do the orcas ever seem to notice your drones?
No, actually, we're usually, we're not way down low. We don't go right on top of the whales. They can't hear them. Of course, they hear the boats. I mean, the boats, they can hear the boats, but that's what some people are funny because you think, why do they think like the drones might affect them? But actually, you're in a boat, and the boat they can hear for sure, but the drones they don't notice at all.
Um, Another interesting question is how do killer whales go about finding their mate?
Well, that's interesting. We don't know for sure because that's something that's really hard to study. Um, so we think our killer whales, they probably don't mate with, animals within their own group. Like they're not going to obviously mate with their sister, you would think. But that's why we think they travel all the way up to British Columbia and they're seen with killer whales that are not part of their normal group, that they're not seen with most of the year, that live in British Columbia. And that would make the most sense that they're actually going up there to mate with those killer whales. Some people have studied a little bit on paternity with genetics. The only way we could tell is if, we sample all the killer whales and take a little piece of skin and blubber, which I've done before to get the chemical contaminants and the skin for genetics. And if you did that, you'd have to sample a lot of males. And from that, you could determine who the father is. And some of that work is being done with the residents, with the resident type of killer whales. But we don't know, one male probably mates with many different females. So there could be one father for many killer whales, maybe a more dominant or male that's chosen by the females. But that's a good question because it's very hard to study. You
I
just don't see it happen. You see
Yeah.
males try to mate with other males, younger males, than you do ever with the females.
Oh, yeah. Well, when we are at this point, how about the menopause? When does the menopause start, and how easy to identify whether killer whale is a male or female?
Well, it's very easy to tell they're male or female only when they get to be about 10 or 12 years old. Before that, you can't tell because their fin is small. But once a male gets to be about 10, 12 years old, his fin is starting to sprout, which means it starts getting a little bit bigger. And then you can say, oh, he's a sprouter, which means his fin's not all the way tall, but it's starting to just grow. And you can tell. And then, a few years beyond that, when he's like 15 or so, the fin might, get really tall, and that's how you can tell for sure. But before that, when they're young, you only can tell if you get a picture of them breaching, which we do a lot of times. Like we'll get pictures of calves breaching and can look on their underside and see their little genital slits and tell male from female that way. And menopause, once killer whales are about 40 years old, plus or minus, they stop having calves. And you can tell, once this female, she doesn't have calves anymore. And usually, we've followed them for so long now. Some of these killer whales that are almost 40, I saw when they were just babies. And so it's interesting to have a whole lifetime of experience watching some of these same whales to know how many calves they've had for their whole life, who's survived. Of course, we don't always know if their calf died because we don't see these killer whales. Some of them we don't see maybe twice a year. Some groups we may not see very often. Other groups we see a lot more often, but it's not like they're just sitting there every day. So you can't piece together some of the things during those big gaps when you don't see them.
I see. Um, if this group is small, how do they manage to avoid problems from inbreeding? I think this,
Yeah, well,
you
there
know,
there might be some of that, like inbreeding a little bit with like southern residents, because the population is small. But with our killer whales, the transient population is actually pretty large, especially in the northern British Columbia area, Washington. That transient population has increased quite a bit. Our killer whale population seems to be kind of stable, same numbers that we've had, years ago that we have now almost, but in the northern areas, they're doing much better. They're increasing. So they're probably not inbreeding as much because there's more of a choice of our killer whales mixing with the whales that they don't normally see that are up in that area. That's probably, like I said, why would they travel all the way up to British Columbia to go when there's tons of prey right off our coast? They could just stay right around the Channel Islands or Monterey Bay and eat all the sea lions they want, but they choose to travel all the way up the coast. And it's probably for mating with animals that are not, related to them.
yeah.
Because the ones that live around here seem to be very much related, like that group of all 5 or 6 matrilines that we see most often hunting the gray whales that I showed the family tree of. They seem to be kind of all related. And so it wouldn't make sense that they'd mate within those whales that are live around here. You'd have to go further to get to whales that you're not related to.
Yeah, yeah. I think I need to just ask you the last question. Um, so, where can we find Inside the Killer Whale Brain graphic? Do you have any?
I
Can
made that graphic
Oh,
with the computer help. And guess how, with what kind of computer help I made it with. But I you can have it. I mean, you can make a copy of it, or I
oh,
can make a copy of it.
yeah, maybe after our recording went alive, people also look at it from there, or we
Oh yeah,
can,
you can take a screenshot of it. Yeah.
yeah.
Do you want to bring the slide back up?
Okay. Let's see. Let me escape.
If it's handy.
Yeah, I can just find it here. But yeah, I just made that with the computer, with AI help.
These slides are fantastic, Nancy. Really great.
There it is. So you can take a screenshot of that. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very sci-fi looking.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Do you want to ask maybe the last question? Because I do think when you alluded to their language and even the idea that maybe how did you put it? Like it's almost like they can read each other's mind.
Right, telepathy, which is
Yeah,
possibly, I mean, there's some people, scientist type people that think there's a chance that that could happen. I mean, they might have evolved that before humans have. There's some evidence that humans may have it, like autistic people have shown some evidence of that. I mean, that's something that, may be evolving that killer whales may already have. And we don't know for sure, but there's some thoughts about that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, well, it sounds like the learning is going to truly be endless.
Right. Yes, it's always endless, especially for animals you don't see every day.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of effort,
Yeah.
many years, obviously, to get this information because we can't just go out and see them every day. You have to be out all the time and, maybe a couple sightings a month. So that's why in April and May, we go out for our research and also we take people out too to help with that as a way to cover the research too. And we'll, sometimes take our smaller boat out, but we have trips, we go out all day. I've been doing that for many years now during
Yeah.
April and May, during the main times when we, have a chance to see them more often. And that's where we put our effort, going out every single day and hoping to find them. But they're not
Yeah.
here every day. We know that. We know for sure they're just not going to be here every day. You just don't know when. That's just kind of the time of year when we see them more often. There's another peak in the fall, like, August, September, October, we see them, but, we saw quite a few in March. So, it varies quite a bit. You can be seen any time of year. It's just the luck, just be there at the right time.
Nancy, I don't think we should end though without discussing, at least for the moment, just the tragedy of essentially the kidnappings for these
Oh, the
theme
aquarium.
parks or yeah. So I mean, is there any kind of a pushback on that? Or
Well, unfortunately, I mean, that's what's disturbing. They're taking them from, an area of Russia that where bowheads live, one of the few areas where bowheads are not found in the Arctic, and the killer whales, hunt the bowheads there. And there's not very many killer whales. They're all mostly transients in that area, but and they're using them, taking them to these. China has built like 12
oh,
aquariums. This particular one is huge. It's like has 5 Guinness World Records for like the biggest tank or the biggest this or the biggest that. But still, it's not big enough for killer whales. They'll never be good enough for killer whales because, these are all transients at one time were living in the ocean, right off Russia, hunting bowhead whales or seals and sea lions. And now, they're
yeah.
stuck in this tank that is still not big enough for them. And unfortunately, China is doing what we did in the 70s. They're starting what we did in the 70s, our country, and now our country is ending it finally. SeaWorld and aquariums have decided no more breeding of captivity of killer whales in captivity, no more births, and they're going to phase out shows of killer whales. So the last killer whales will just live out their lives in those tanks unless they can be convinced to put them in sanctuaries. And there are several places like Double Bay in Vancouver that's building a sanctuary that they hope SeaWorld will agree to put like Corky, one of their whales. It's part of the Northern Resident Group that's been in captivity 47 years, but they know
Right.
who his family is. His family's still living up in British Columbia. So they hope to put him in a sanctuary, and the other killer whales that are in those, because eventually it's going to be like one killer whale in each aquarium that's going to be left, and they're all by themselves. So far,
Huh.
the aquariums haven't agreed to it yet. SeaWorld won't even listen to the idea anymore. Like they can't, won't even talk to these people, unfortunately. But the people are still building the aquarium and putting the money into it, regardless of SeaWorld's opinion right now, hoping that, it will change. But China is doing what we are ending. They're beginning right now to put all these killer whales in all these different aquariums in China and Japan, more so in China, because of course China is huge. And all these Chinese people think it's great unless they can be educated, somehow that it's not great.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah. I don't, does it help if staying at least in the United States to write to SeaWorld? We
I
should
mean,
talk
yeah,
to
SeaWorld, if they're
Michael
still trying to
Guppy.
get Corky to get out of
Yeah.
SeaWorld,
Yeah.
yeah, that could, I mean, people can write them. I'm sure they're still trying to get them to agree to let the whale go to the sanctuary.
Yeah, it might be something that we will urge our community to do. And, I know you know Michael Reppy, who's
Yeah,
behind the one.
we did a fundraising trip for that sanctuary last month, and he came on the boat with us with all the people, and
Nice.
we
Yeah.
donated all the money to that.
Oh, that's fantastic. All right. Well, so much to do on behalf of our amazing oceans and our amazing wildlife, and including this amazing species.
Yeah.
You've got to say is very similar to humans in some ways.
Oh, yes, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Not as
Okay.
destructive though.
No, no, that's for sure. We're the number one on that in that regard.
Right.
Somebody's asking for a link for Sunday's excursion, and we did put that in the chat. And otherwise, just send us a note, or go to our website, or because we do have a link. And thank you, Nancy, for extending the discount. And we'll really look forward to seeing you on Sunday.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks again.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you, Nancy.
Okay.
All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Okay, goodbye.
Bye, everyone.